I like the concept of health span over lifespan, and that's really defined as the number of good quality years you have on the planet. My name is Harry Jameson. I'm founder of Pillar. I've been a trainer, performance coach, and wellbeing entrepreneur for over 20 years. And I've been really fortunate to work with some of the highest performing people and brands on the planet. I founded Pillar, and we're a private wellness members club here at Raffles, London at the OWO, and we have a portfolio of wellness clubs and restaurants that are growing internationally, and something really exciting coming soon in the real estate market. I'm here to speak to Ellidore about health and wellbeing. Most people will come to the table not with 100% of the truth, kind of probably galvanized it slightly differently in their own minds. They're probably not actually aware of where their pain points are. Primary driver is weight. People go, I want to lose a bit of weight. Okay, when you dig underneath the surface, what's going on? Well, I'm not sleeping properly, or I'm drinking too much, or my energy balance is out of whack, or I travel a lot, and my jet lag recovery strategies just don't exist. So you came to me for weight loss, but now we're talking about sleep and stress and your relationships and your digestive health and your immune system. So the catalyst is not always the problem, and you need to dig it underneath the surface, and that's the talent of a good coach. You know, many of the people we work with are very, very successful businessmen and women. The reason why McKinsey have a job is because people are so buried into their own business that they can't take a kind of 5,000-foot view and really see what's going on. So I can be very objective, I can be very impartial, and I can be very transparent and very honest with someone who's probably lied to themselves a little bit. Transparency and honesty from a source that you trust is how you provoke or invoke behavioural change. Time is limited for everybody, and the demographic of clientele that we're talking about, it's super limited. You know, you've got a very time poor demographic of people. If you come to me and say you don't have time to exercise, don't have time to eat well, don't have time to think about those things, I would put a big argument to say you don't have time not to do that. If you're not well rested, well nourished, well energized, with a good mental clarity, having had a good night's sleep, if it's what can I do in 12 and a half minutes, the answer's not a lot. And I would recommend that you give it another 45 minutes, you stretch for 12 and a half minutes, then you do some cardio to raise your pulse, get you ready for exercise, then you strength train, then you stretch, then you do a bit of breathing. You can condense a lot into an hour, but give it the time and respect it deserves, is my view. How often do you think you should train hard? That's the question. And the answer is only about 20% of the time. The misconception from high performers who have been primarily, by their nature, driven, type A, foot to the floor, sleep when I'm dead type people, that doesn't work. And it doesn't work because your body doesn't get fitter and stronger when you train, it gets fitter and stronger when you recover. Especially as you age, managing your nervous system, how much time you spend in a stressed state, how much adrenaline and cortisol is coursing through your veins at any one time is really important. I would say 1 in every 5 sessions of mine is I've emptied the tank. And then there's some, mid-level training, and then there's some pure recovery sessions where I just walk, or I run, or I swim, or I do an ice bath and a sauna, and that counts as a session. And ultimately they can be more beneficial. In life, more is better. And in training mirrors life, so more training equals better results. It's definitely not the case. Older, more established kind of, people who are entering into the second and third stages of their lives, and they would care about longevity. And I was primarily coaching people who were had reached a good level of success, but still had a lot more to give. Late 30s, early 40s, really wanted to push. Now, the habits and behaviors that we would coach those 2 individual subgroups were the same. Telling a 25-year-old to do something today so they don't become ill when they're 60 just goes over their head. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and by movement I mean strength training and VO2 max. Those things combined with good relationships and a really well-defined goal will help you perform well. And 95% of disease is lifestyle-based. So if I can offset the chances of things going wrong with me, it's a 5% genetic component that arguably I can't do anything about. But the rest of it is behavioural. And so as long as I'm doing the things that are prescribed, I'll perform well and I'll live longer and happier and healthier. So actually the drivers are similar. And life can be a bit like that. What you put in your 30s and 40s and 50s are going to impact what you're able to do in your 60s, 70s and 80s. And if you want to be able to tie your shoelaces and go skiing with your grandkids, you've got to put the work in a little bit earlier. And then, you'll reap the benefits later on. Sleep has become so topical at the moment. What it's actually looking at is your stress responses throughout the day and how well your nervous system is balanced between fight or flight and rest and digest. But I think it's about managing your nervous system. You can do that through taking time to meditate or breathe or less time on your screen. Wellness should be an enjoyment, not taking away enjoyable things. Make sure you dedicate the time to the people that you love, like your kids, like your family, like your friends. Because they fall by the wayside, and I think they have a huge impact on long-term health. Build resilience through failure. Muscles, every time you lift a weight, you should lift, you can lift weights to the point where you can't lift anymore, which is to failure. And that tears the muscle a little bit, and then you sleep and then you eat protein and it repairs and it grows and it gets bigger. You're not necessarily born with that grit and determination, but if you've become successful, you've definitely failed a few times on that journey. And I think resilience, mental and physical, is built through failure, but it's also built through not giving up when that failure hits you in the butt and you don't want to do it anymore. Stress, if I've seen a commonality between the clients that I've worked with over a very long period of time, the really successful ones are able to deal and manage stress. So if I've got a bowl here and I turn a tap on and water's coming into that bowl, I would say the water represents the stress of life. It's not going anywhere. Your body's capacity to deal with stress is the bowl. And sooner or later, that bowl will fill up and it will spill over the edge and you will start to see physical manifestations of stress. My job as a coach is to give you a bigger bowl and to give you a more resilience, capacity and coping mechanisms to deal with stress. Because fortunately, that stress isn't going anywhere. You run a company, that stress isn't going anywhere. If you are ill, that stress isn't going anywhere. And if you've got kids, they're definitely not going anywhere. So you've got to develop a bigger bowl. And so I think we shouldn't shy away from stress. Stress is good in the right context, and it causes friction and resilience. Friction that grows into resilience. No high-performing athlete was ever not stressed. They were just able to cope under that veil of stress. I love to play golf. I play golf on a Friday whenever I can. And for me, that time, and often with business colleagues and investors, but sometimes just with friends, or sometimes just with my dad. And it's like 4 hours of middle-aged male counselling, right? There's no phone in my pocket. I'm in nature, doing something I love with someone whose company I enjoy. And I'm being competitive, but I'm being relaxed at the same time. And I find it hugely therapeutic. Those things are as important from a recovery perspective as a sports massage or a sauna or a protein shake. Physiological recovery is slightly different from emotional recovery, which is slightly different from spiritual recovery. And I would put recovery in a bracket of the restoration of energy. How am I restoring my energy? Similarly, I can't work 25 days in a row till midnight. What do I expect is going to happen? The phenomenon of burnout is not a surprise to me. What would I do to restore myself? I'd take my kids to the cinema. I'd take my wife for dinner. I'd go and see my parents. I think those elements have been lost a little bit in a lot of people's lifestyles. And I think that is increased the higher up the kind of success ladder or perceptual success ladder that we have. People have forgotten to do things they love with people that they love, and I think that is the ultimate recovery. Environment is really interesting. We at Pillar, we're launching a kind of residential concept where we look at the walls in which we're in, and physiologically now, my physiology is reacting to this environment. Example of how an environment can be more conducive to wellness is a bedroom. How have I designed a bedroom to get optimal sleep? And so the physical environment can have a massive impact. Now that can come into cognitive function, circadian rhythm, lighting, how much biophilia there is in the room, what the color palette is. Our physiology is bombarded every day with things that are designed to make us feel anxious and stressed. 24-hour news on our phones. The world is falling apart economically, socially, through every other measurable metric. And I think our homes, the places where we spend time, our offices, the places where we engage in wellness, should have been ergonomically designed and very thoughtfully put together to be positively impactful for our health. Longevity has become owned by the supplement space and the technology space and the wearable space. But when we know that 95% of disease is lifestyle based and only 5% genetic, we need to get the foundations of our lifestyle correct before we start to add the little cherry on the top. I like the concept of health span over lifespan, and that's really defined as the number of good quality years you have on the planet. And unfortunately, people are a bit too reactive to their health. They kind of wait for things to break and then they try and do something about it. Science-backed interventions from diagnostics through to supplementation and red light therapy and all the good stuff, but get the foundations right. And we really believe in lifestyle as the foundation, and we coach around that and we build communities around that, and that's my solid belief system.